In a small village tucked between golden fields and dusty roads, there lived a woman named Rukhsana. She didn't own much. Just a tiny tin-roofed shed near the main street, a toolbox passed down by her late father, and hands that told the story of years spent fixing the broken. People in the village saw her every day, crouched beside old bikes, adjusting nuts, cleaning spark plugs, hammering loose parts. She never said much, worked quietly, and when someone couldn't pay, she'd fix it anyway. Most didn't take her seriously. She was a woman, and in their eyes, women weren't meant to deal with machines. They'd laugh behind her back, sometimes to her face. But she never reacted. She kept working, wiping the grease off her fingers and getting on with her day. Then one afternoon, something strange happened. A sleek black car, the kind they only saw in city billboards, pulled into the village. It was coated with road dust, and its engine made a choking sound before coming to a full stop in front of her workshop. The driver stepped out, tall, well-dressed, sunglasses hiding his eyes, impatience in his walk. He opened the hood, tried making a few calls on his phone, but there was no signal. His frustration grew. He looked around, saw the villagers staring at him. Then his eyes fell on her, wiping her hands, watching quietly. He walked over. "Can you fix it?" he asked with a voice that wasn't quite hopeful, but not entirely dismissive either. Rukhsana walked over to the car without a word. She inspected the engine like it was something she had known forever. Checked the hoses, the coolant, tapped the sensor, and twisted a loose wire back into place. 15 minutes. No drama. No fuss. She looked up and simply said, "Try it now." The man got behind the wheel, turned the key. The engine purred back to life. He stared at her, speechless. "What did you do?" "Just overheated," she replied softly. The sensor needed resetting. He took out his wallet, offered a handful of cash. She shook her head. "No need," she said. "Allah dek raha hai. God is watching." He insisted. She refused again. The man nodded, surprised. He got back in the car and drove away, leaving a trail of dust behind him. But something about her, the quiet confidence, the skill, the humility stayed with him long after he left the village. That night, in his penthouse far away from the dirt roads, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the woman with grease-stained hands and soft eyes who refused money after helping a stranger. The next morning, he made a few calls. A few hours later, something happened that the village would never forget. It began with a strange sound in the sky. A loud, thunderous chopping of air. People ran out of their homes. Children pointed upward. The sky rumbled, and there it was, a helicopter, descending slowly, dust blowing everywhere. It landed right next to the village mosque, on the only piece of flat land big enough to hold it. Everyone gathered, shielding their eyes from the wind. And then the man stepped out. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had a team with him. Men carrying boxes. A cameraman. And in his hand, a small black case. He scanned the crowd until he saw her. Rukhsana stood quietly at the edge, eyes wide, unsure of what was happening. He walked toward her. The crowd parted. He stopped in front of her and gently placed the case in her hands. "Open it," he said. Inside was a set of shiny keys and official documents. Rukhsana looked up, confused. "It's yours," he said. "A fully equipped workshop, in your name. Tools, power backup, training vouchers. Everything." The crowd gasped. People started murmuring. Some didn't believe what they were seeing. He smiled and added, "I run a chain of auto service centers. I've seen hundreds of mechanics. None of them did what you did, with the heart you did it with. You didn't just fix my car, you reminded me what honesty looks like." But that wasn't all. From one of the boxes, his team pulled out a new pair of overalls, boots, a nameplate that read Ustad Rukhsana Auto Works, and a framed certificate of recognition signed by him personally. She stood frozen. Tears welled up in her eyes, not because of the gifts, but because, for the first time in her life, people were clapping. not laughing. The same men who once mocked her now stepped forward, heads lowered, offering their apologies. Her hands were still greasy, her sandals still torn. But in that moment, she stood taller than anyone else. The helicopter didn't just bring gifts, it brought dignity. And for the first time, the village didn't see her as just a woman. They saw her for what she always was. A master of her craft, a soul of integrity, and a reminder that true power often lives in the quietest corners. But that wasn't the end, because what happened next was even more unexpected. She held the keys like they were something fragile, almost afraid to believe they were real. But the man wasn't done. He turned back to his team and gave a small nod. One of them stepped forward with a tablet. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice warm but steady. "We've launched a national campaign to train and support rural mechanics, especially women. You'll be the face of it." Gasps rose from the crowd. Faces turned. People whispered her name. Rukhsana looked shocked. "Me?" she asked, barely audible. The man smiled. "You inspired it." She had never stood in front of a camera, never spoken to more than a dozen people at once. But now, a mic was clipped to her dupatta. The camera light blinked red. She looked into the lens nervous, her hands fidgeting, and then something changed. The same calm that helped her fix broken engines took over. She spoke. Not about her struggles. Not about poverty. But about tools. Gears. About how machines don't care if you're a man or a woman, they only respond to care, to precision, to understanding. She spoke of how her father taught her everything he knew before the village told her to pick something more suitable. How she worked in silence for years. How every tool had a memory. And how, even when no one noticed, she still gave it her best. When the cameras stopped rolling, there was silence. Then applause. From the villagers. From the visitors. Even from those who once doubted her. In the following days, something changed. A truck arrived with brand new equipment, engine hoists, air compressors, diagnostic tools, things no one in the village had ever seen before. Her small shed was rebuilt brick by brick into a bright, professional workshop. A new signboard was put up. Kids stopped by just to watch her work. Local girls started bringing their bicycles, curious, asking questions, wanting to learn. And Rukhsana taught them, not as a mechanic, but as a mentor. Word spread quickly. A local news channel came. Then a national one. Then an international website picked up the story. Village woman fixes engine, builds empire of hope. Emails flooded in. NGO offers. Invites to speak at vocational programs. Mechanics from other towns wrote letters, asking to visit her. One morning, an envelope arrived. It bore the seal of the Ministry of Industries. Inside, an official certificate. And a letter inviting her to Islamabad to receive an award for transformational contribution to women in technical trades. The villagers gathered again, watching her step into a government car for the first time. She wore the same dupatta, but her posture was different now. Upright, grounded, proud. In the capital, she stood on a stage brighter than any place she'd known. A soft sunset over the village. Rukhsana sits at her workshop's doorway, the signboard glowing behind her. A little girl stands beside her holding a wrench, eyes full of hope. The helicopter is gone. The village is quiet. But the legacy is loud. She fixed engines, but built futures. Fade to black. The sun begins to sink slowly behind the dusty hills, washing the entire village in a warm golden hue. Everything moves slower now. The day has faded, but the light still holds on, gently wrapping itself around the trees, the rooftops, and the soft dirt paths. Rukhsana sits quietly at the threshold of her workshop. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her hands rest in her lap, calloused, tired, but at peace. The same hands that once tightened bolts under flickering lanterns. The same hands that people used to laugh at. Now they rest with quiet dignity. Behind her, The new signboard glows softly in the evening light. Ustad Rukhsana Auto Works. Fresh paint. Clean lettering. A symbol of something that used to be unthinkable in this village. The workshop is still open. Not for customers but for life. Inside, the tools are neatly hung. The floor is swept. The new air compressor hums gently. A toolbox with her name engraved on it rests near the wall unopened. Unused today. Not because there was no work, but because the real work today was something else. A little girl approaches. Barefoot. Curious. Maybe 7 or 8. She holds a wrench too big for her tiny hands. Her eyes aren't looking at the sky or the road or the setting sun, they're fixed on Rukhsana. The girl sits beside her, mimicking her posture. She says nothing at first. She doesn't have to. Rukhsana turns slowly and looks at the child. Their eyes meet. For a few moments, the world feels still, like everything outside the frame has been muted. Only their quiet breath, the faint rustle of leaves, and the distant moo of a cow can be heard. Then the girl asks softly, almost whispering, "Baji, can I fix engines too?" Rukhsana doesn't answer right away. She looks out across the road. The same road where years ago, people mocked her. The same road where a luxury car once broke down and changed her life. Now it's empty, glowing under a blanket of sunset dust. She finally speaks barely above a whisper. "You can do anything, child. Anything." She reaches down and gently adjusts the way the girl holds the wrench. Not correcting her, guiding her. The moment stretches. A breeze passes through the trees. A distant azan begins in the background, soft, echoing through the village. The sound wraps around them like prayer, like memory. More children walk past. A few boys peek into the workshop. Some wave. One carries a tire tube. Another has an old spark plug in his hand. They're coming not just to fix things but to learn. They see her differently now. Even the elders who once passed with cold eyes now nod with quiet respect as they walk by. But Rukhsana isn't watching them. She's watching the little girl. Because in her, she sees herself not the woman she became, but the girl she used to be. The girl no one believed in. The girl who listened more than she spoke. The girl who once sat in her father's shadow, learning how to tell the story of an engine just by listening to its heartbeat. And now, that story, her story, is continuing through someone else. The camera slowly pulls back. Upward. We see the full view of the village. The mosque. The narrow alleyways. The fields beyond, golden in the fading light. A few rooftops dotted with children. The village has returned to its rhythm. But something is undeniably different. At the center of it all is her workshop, modest, glowing, alive. No helicopter. No crowds. Just a woman. A child. A dream passed on silently, beautifully. The frame widens even more. Birds fly across the orange sky. Smoke curls from a distant chulha, and the gentle sound of a wrench being placed on the ground echoes, grounding the moment in what it has always been about: work, dignity, and legacy. As the camera continues its silent ascent, Rukhsana looks up toward the sky. Not in pride, not in sadness, but in peace. Then, she turns to the girl beside her and smiles. A real smile. Soft, earned, eternal. The screen begins to fade to black slowly. She never asked for recognition, never chased success. She just showed up every day and did the work. And without saying a word, she gave her village something they never had before. A future. A final pause. The screen goes fully black. And in the silence, one last line spoken almost as a whisper. She fixed engines, but built futures.